Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world where bread isn't just food, it's power, politics, and sometimes a death sentence. You're walking slowly through the narrow, dim streets of pre-revolutionary Paris. The stones under your feet are uneven, and every breath carries the scent of smoke, sewage, and something baking, though you're not sure where that's coming from. The sky above is smeared with a dull gray haze, and the city hums like it's holding its breath. You hear a woman yelling at a baker 3 streets over, something about how her children haven't eaten since yesterday. A few neighbors join in. The baker closes his shutters. A dog barks. Somewhere nearby, a cart creaks slowly over cobblestones. This isn't a city of fresh pastries and fine cheeses. It's a place on edge. And you're here to find out how something as harmless as brioche, a fluffy, eggy bread, somehow became a symbol of ignorance so severe it got people's heads chopped off. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments if you're still awake. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're stepping back into 1788, and things are starting to fray. The wheat harvest has been awful, again. Prices are rising faster than your neighbor's curses. Bread, the staple of every French table, is suddenly the rarest thing on it. And when bread disappears, the system starts to crack. No one is starving yet, but they're certainly thinking about it. You pass a row of market stalls, some selling potatoes with suspicious eyes, others just empty. A loaf of pain de campagne that used to cost 2 sous now costs 10. If you earn 15 a day and you've got 3 kids, you do the math. People talk a lot. The baker is hoarding. The nobility are throwing banquets. The king hasn't been seen in Paris in months. And somewhere, someone says something about brioche. Of course, no one really heard Marie Antoinette say it, but that's never stopped a good rumor. You pass a huddle of gossiping women near the well. One of them claims her cousin worked in the kitchens at Versailles, swears the queen called wheat bread prison food. Another scoffs. She wouldn't know bread if it hit her in the powdered face, she says, laughing. You move on. The irony is, brioche wasn't even that common. It was expensive to make, loaded with eggs and butter. More like a soft, enriched bread for holidays or special occasions. Most peasants wouldn't recognize it if it landed in their soup. But here's the thing about revolutions. They need symbols. They need villains. And let them eat brioche, even if she never said it, was just too perfect. You pause near the Seine. The water flows slowly, thick and brown. A man fishes with a net, but pulls up only weeds and a broken spoon. The city is heavy with tension. Everyone feels it, but nothing's happened yet. Not really, just whispers and hunger. Back at the palace, the royal family lives in a different world, literally and figuratively. Marie Antoinette is raising her children, planning a theater performance, ordering porcelain painted with forget-me-nots. She's 33, and people already hate her for her accent, her clothes, and her fondness for gambling. They also hate her because they think she's not French enough. Born an Austrian archduchess, married off young, and not particularly good at pretending to care what the people think, she's become the perfect villain. Never mind that she also gave to charity and tried, unsuccessfully, to curb spending. Still, in the eyes of a starving public, trying doesn't feed anyone. You sit on the edge of a public fountain, watching children chase pigeons. One of them stops and asks you, "What's brioche?" You tell him it's like bread, but softer. He shrugs and says he's never had soft bread. Then he runs off to throw pebbles at a goose. Historians still debate the famous quote, whether it was misattributed from Rousseau, invented by angry pamphleteers, or simply a bad translation of something more subtle. But in the end, it doesn't matter. The myth is more powerful than the truth, always has been. You walk past a bakery with nothing in the window but a sign, closed until further notice. Someone's scrawled underneath in charcoal, "Long live bread." You think about how something as small as a loaf, too dry, too expensive, too scarce, can carry a nation to the edge. And you're just at the beginning. You feel the weight of what's coming. The heads, the mobs, the roar of the guillotine. But not yet. Tonight, there's still time to wander through a city teetering on the edge, to smell the warm air from an oven that hasn't cooled in years, to imagine what it must have felt like to hear the word brioche and flinch. Because here, in the shadow of revolution, bread is never just bread. You wake to the faint sound of bells, distant, delicate, somewhere in the morning fog that blankets Versailles like powdered sugar on stale cake. The palace isn't bustling yet, not truly. A few yawning servants shuffle down corridors carrying buckets, coal, or court gossip. You follow the scent of warm linens and perfume as you wander through the sun-drenched halls. Light filters in through tall, golden windows. Everything gleams, even the dust. Life before the storm is strangely choreographed. Here, nothing happens by accident, except maybe the revolution. You step into the daily theater of monarchy. In this place, getting dressed is a group activity. Brushing your teeth involves wine, and privacy is considered deeply unfashionable. You're standing in the Queen's bedroom now. Marie Antoinette is asleep under a mountain of silk. Around you, noble women whisper and compete for the privilege of handing her a stocking. Eventually, she'll open her eyes, sip broth, and begin her daily performance as France's most visible woman. You, meanwhile, are watching from the corner, like a ghost who's not supposed to be here. The Queen stretches, yawns, and the ballet begins. You think it's all very pretty, and also completely absurd. She's 23 years old when the complaints about bread reach her ears. But at Versailles, bread is something abstract. It's served in silver baskets and arrives already sliced, already warm. Marie might know the word brioche, but whether she's ever really looked at it, let alone understood its price, is another question. Still, she's not the only one floating above reality. All around you, powdered faces sip chocolate and discuss embroidery patterns, while France's economy sinks faster than your patience. You peek into the king's private library. Louis XVI is busy studying lock mechanisms. Yes, locks. Not taxation, not famine, locks. The palace has 700 rooms. You walk through a few dozen of them. Drawing rooms with velvet walls. Mirror corridors that reflect your sleepy expression 100 times. You catch your reflection beside a nobleman in heels taller than yours. He nods politely. Back in the Queen's chambers, there's an odd kind of serenity. Marie plays with her dog, a pampered pug named Thisbe, while a servant braids her hair into a sculpture so elaborate it may qualify as architecture. You glance at a tray nearby. It holds fruit, chocolate, and yes, 2 slices of golden, pillowy brioche. One has a bite taken out of it. You wonder, idly, if this is where the legend begins. But of course, it probably isn't. The quote had been floating around since at least Rousseau, who accused some unnamed princess of suggesting cake instead of bread. But Marie became the symbol because she was easy to hate, easy to blame, foreign, glamorous, bad at small talk. You step through the gardens next. The air is sweet with early blooms and carefully hidden manure. Versailles is designed to impress and to deceive. It's meant to say, "Look how stable we are." You can almost hear the hedges whispering that. But the whispers are drowned out by something louder: silence. No one here talks about the grain shortages, or the debt, or the bread riots that keep popping up like mushrooms in wet soil. It's not that they don't know, it's just uncomfortable to mention. You sit on a marble bench while 2 noblewomen stroll past, discussing a new Turkish-style pavilion the Queen is building for her personal amusement. It'll cost roughly the annual salaries of 3,000 farmers. You think of Paris, of the people waiting in line at bakeries for hours, of mothers slicing a single loaf into thinner and thinner pieces. You think of the man yesterday fishing with an empty net. Then you look up at the opulence around you and wonder how anyone could not see what was coming. Historians still debate whether the royal court was truly ignorant or willfully blind. Some argue Marie tried to modernize court life in her own way. She wore simpler dresses, supported charities, raised her children without wet nurses. Others say it was all for show, that her garden cottages and shepherdess fantasies were a slap in the face to real poverty. You follow her later to the Petit Trianon, a cozy escape palace on the Versailles grounds. She's hosting a few close friends. Just nobles, of course, but the fun ones. They drink wine and gossip about Paris scandals. Someone tells a joke about someone else's wig catching fire. Everyone laughs, even Marie. And still not a word about bread. You sit at the edge of the room, invisible again, watching a young queen who has no idea that every gesture, every smile, every slice of cake is being recorded by someone with a printing press. Outside these walls, her reputation is already in flames. The truth is, Versailles wasn't designed for reality. It was built to escape it. The nobles here don't farm, they don't bake, they don't even know how many sous a loaf of bread costs. But soon, they'll learn. Brutally. For now, you wander through another corridor, past more candlelit mirrors and chandeliers heavy enough to crush a man. You trail the scent of orange blossoms until it fades into something more metallic. You pass a chamber musician tuning a violin. He looks at you as if to say, "Enjoy it while it lasts." And you do, sort of. It's hard not to marvel at the architecture, the silence, the ridiculousness of it all. But even here, your feet ache. You feel hunger in the background. Not your own, France's. So you keep walking. You find yourself drifting into the city now. Versailles fades behind you like a fading perfume, floral, sweet, and too expensive. The roads are rougher here. Dust sticks to your shoes. The smells are less curated. Smoke, sweat, cabbage boiled too long. You're in Paris, but not the postcard version. You're walking along narrow alleys lined with crooked houses and overflowing gutters. The voices here are louder, the laughter sharper, the hunger unmistakable. There's a baker with soot on her face, waving off a desperate customer who's trying to trade a spoon for a crust. Nearby, two boys are scraping dough from the inside of an old oven. Someone drops a sack of flour, and everyone on the street turns like it was a gunshot. You blend in. People here don't notice you the way they did at Versailles. You're just another face, another body in a crowd that grows thicker every day. Grain prices have tripled in a few months. People say it's the weather. Others blame the nobles. A few mutter about greedy merchants and English sabotage. But everyone agrees on one thing: the bread is vanishing. You pass a wall plastered with pamphlets. Some show caricatures of the king with a pig's nose. Others depict Marie Antoinette surrounded by cakes, looking deeply unbothered. The image isn't accurate, but it sticks. People don't need the truth. They need a symbol. And she's perfect for it. At the street corner, a preacher is shouting about sin and suffering. He waves a loaf of bread like a holy relic. You think about how bread has become something sacred, like currency or scripture. You wonder if anyone here even remembers what brioche tastes like. Brioche, after all, isn't everyday bread. It's rich, full of eggs and butter, closer to a dessert than sustenance. If you're eating brioche, you're doing extremely well, or extremely oblivious. You stop at a bakery window. There's nothing on display, but the smell lingers, a ghost of yeast and warmth. Inside, the baker shrugs. No flour left. A mother walks past you, her child whining softly. She pulls him along gently, murmuring promises of soup later, even though you both know she has none. Hunger changes people slowly, then all at once. You follow the crowd to the Place de Grève. It's where public punishments happen. Beheadings, floggings, a kind of grotesque entertainment. But today, it's a protest. Or maybe a riot. The line between the two is blurry these days. People are chanting, shouting about justice and flour. One man has a sign that reads, "Tax the cake." Another wears a crude crown made of old bread crusts. It would be funny if it weren't also a little terrifying. You move through the masses, careful not to bump anyone too hard. Tensions here are like dry straw. You never know what'll ignite it. Someone tosses a stone. It hits a bakery window. Glass shatters. People cheer. A woman climbs up on a barrel and screams something about the Austrian woman. You know who she means. The Queen's accent never let her blend in. To many Parisians, she'll always be foreign, an outsider wearing pearls. You step away from the chaos and duck into a quiet alley. Here, you find two old men playing cards with bent, greasy pieces of paper. They don't stop when you arrive. One of them mumbles, "The Queen thinks we can eat cake," with a laugh that sounds more like coughing. His friend shrugs, "I'd take crumbs, honestly." You want to explain the myth, how she probably never said that the quote had floated around for decades before Marie even arrived in France. But you don't. It wouldn't matter. Truth has calories, sure, but rumor is easier to swallow. Historians still argue about how much Marie Antoinette really knew. Some say she read the petitions, that she felt genuine sympathy. Others think she stayed in her rose-tinted world too long, believing that charity dinners and new ribbons were enough to make people forget their stomachs. Either way, you can feel the gap between her world and this one widening by the hour. You walk toward the Seine. The water looks lazy today, thick and brown. You pause on a bridge and watch it drift by. You imagine loaves of bread floating downstream like tiny boats, then shake the thought away. You're getting tired. Hunger does that. At the riverbank, a group of washerwomen are talking politics while beating linens against stones. One says her cousin saw the Queen walking her dog during a riot like it was just any Tuesday. Another swears Marie drinks melted butter from gold goblets. The stories aren't true, but they're oddly satisfying. It feels good to laugh when your stomach's empty. You realize as you listen that the people aren't stupid. They know the system is broken. They've just had enough of waiting for someone to fix it. They want names. They want symbols. They want the head that wears the wig. Even now, as the sky darkens and lamps flicker to life, the air is buzzing with something electric. You feel it in your chest, a kind of tension that doesn't go away with sleep. Paris is tired, and tired people do wild things when their bellies are empty. As you climb the hill back toward the center of town, a boy runs past with a stolen apple. No one chases him. No one can afford to care. You pass by a small bookshop with a pamphlet in the window titled, "What is the Third Estate?" You pause. You've heard of this one. It's about people who work, people who pay, people who die so that others can play cards and powder their wigs. You step inside. The bookseller doesn't look up. He just nods toward the stack by the door. You take one and read as you walk. We are everything. We have been nothing. We want to be something. Your stomach growls. Somewhere, someone else's stomach does too. You wake up. Or maybe you never really slept. The night in Paris is restless. It coughs and murmurs like a city with a fever. You're on a wooden bench near the Rue Saint-Honoré, watching a group of rats argue over a crust of something that might have once been bread. It's oddly comforting. At least they have something to eat. By morning, the streets are already busy. Not cheerful busy, desperate busy. There's a new energy among the people, a sharpness behind their eyes. You follow the crowd again, instinctively drawn to the movement. It's heading toward the Hôtel de Ville, the city's municipal building. More pamphlets are being passed around. Someone shoves one into your hand. It's smeared with ink and bread grease, as usual. It reads, "Bread is peace. No bread is war." Simple enough. Effective. You keep it. This morning, everyone's talking about the price of wheat again. Some blame hoarders, wealthy merchants accused of hiding grain to drive prices up. Others blame the crown, or the weather, or England, or God. The target doesn't matter as much as the anger. It's thick in the air. You can taste it. At the edge of the square, a man with wild eyes and an extremely unhelpful mustache is handing out flyers for a meeting tonight. Another gathering of the Jacobin Club. You've heard of them. Angry, organized, loud. They call themselves patriots, and some of them probably are. Others are just hungry, like everyone else. You walk past the market stalls. Most are empty. One is selling turnip peels. Another offers soup made entirely from onion water and salt. Someone tries to sell you cake crumbs from Versailles as a joke. It's not funny, not really. But a few people laugh, because if you don't laugh, you might cry. Then someone says it. She says it casually, like it's just a thing people say. Well, if they don't have bread, let them eat brioche. Everyone stops. It's the kind of phrase that lands like a slap. She doesn't say Marie Antoinette. She doesn't have to. The implication is loud. You hear a man whisper, "She said it again." No one questions it. No one asks for proof. They just nod grimly, like it's been confirmed. You already know. Historians have chewed on this one for centuries. Most agree Marie Antoinette likely never said that. The quote existed long before her, attributed to earlier nobles and possibly even fictional characters. But in this moment, accuracy is irrelevant. The Queen has become a story, and the story is more powerful than the facts. You watch a boy sketch the scene onto a piece of brown paper. He draws the Queen in a frilly gown, holding a platter of brioche in one hand and a fan in the other. She has an idiotic smile on her face. It's a terrible drawing, but it captures something truthful. Not about Marie necessarily, but about how people feel about her. Down the street, a bakery is on fire. You didn't see who lit it, and no one's putting it out. People are just watching. The flames reflect in their eyes. One woman murmurs, "Maybe now they'll listen." You wonder what it feels like to burn your own source of bread. Probably a bit like revolution. Later, you find yourself near the Palais Royal. It's not just a royal palace anymore. It's become a hub of political gossip, cafe discussions, and impromptu speeches. Someone stands on a table declaring the end of monarchy. Another reads off the day's prices. Everything has gone up again. You sip watered-down wine because there's no milk, and water tastes like sadness. An old man tells you that in 1775 there was already a flour war. You nod. He explains that years ago, when bakers raised their prices, people rioted, and the army stepped in. Dozens died, and guess what happened? Nothing changed. But this time, people feel something different in their bones, like maybe this is the real beginning. He smiles without teeth and says, "Back then, they said brioche too." You wonder how many times that phrase has been recycled, weaponized, shaped into a blade to stab royalty in the back. You picture it on a banner, painted in clumsy red strokes. Let them eat brioche. Catchy, dangerous, poetic in a weird way. As the day wears on, you pass another public square. This one has a guillotine. It's new. Well, not brand new. People have been testing it, tweaking the mechanics. Dr. Guillotin, who lent his name to the device, claimed it would be a more humane method of execution. Efficient, he said. Painless, supposedly. You stare at the clean blade glinting in the sun. It doesn't look painless. There's a crowd gathered, not for an execution, not yet, but just to look, to imagine, to rehearse. You overhear someone muttering about a baker's son who was caught hoarding dough. Others talk about the Bastille. There's a building tension, like someone plucking the same string over and over, waiting for it to snap. And through all of it, the Queen's mythical line echoes, "Let them eat brioche!" You imagine how this rumor started. Maybe a servant misheard a joke. Maybe a noblewoman said it, and someone decided it sounded like something Marie would say. Maybe people just needed something to believe, something that confirmed their suspicion that the palace didn't understand them, didn't care, couldn't hear their hunger over the sound of silk rustling and forks scraping porcelain. You picture the Queen now, somewhere in Versailles, brushing her hair or feeding her dogs, blissfully unaware that her name is on everyone's lips, and not in a good way. She's already been turned into a punchline, then a villain, then a ghost, all before breakfast. As the sun sets, a group of children plays in the street with rocks and twine. One of them pretends to be the king and gets beheaded with a stick. Everyone claps. You wince. Childhood has changed. The lights flicker on, dim and inconsistent. Someone lights a candle in a cracked jar. Another protest begins somewhere in the distance. You can hear it rumbling like a storm far off. No one moves to stop it. You head back toward the bench where your day began. It's still warm from the sun. You sit, you rest your eyes. You think about the way words can shape revolutions, and how something as soft and buttery as brioche can turn into a guillotine. You don't remember falling asleep, but when you open your eyes again, the city has changed. Not in the big, obvious way, not yet, but something is different. You feel it in the way people walk, how they speak in shorter, sharper sentences. Even the pigeons look nervous. Revolution doesn't happen all at once. It brews, bubbles, simmers, like a pot left on the stove too long. And now it's starting to hiss. You stretch your legs and head toward the eastern neighborhoods, where the working-class Parisians, the sans-culottes as they proudly call themselves, are thickest. No breeches for them. They wear long trousers, sturdy boots, and expressions that say, "We're not here for fashion." These are the people who feel the weight of every missing loaf. When they hear brioche, they don't think of a buttery treat. They think of insult layered with icing. You pass a cluster of women scrubbing laundry in a muddy basin. They're gossiping between slaps of wet cloth. You catch pieces of the conversation, how the Queen redecorated her private hamlet at Versailles, while children in the city chew on boiled leather. One woman says she heard the Queen keeps a silver cow. Another claims she feeds it wine-soaked oats. Historians still debate the details of Marie Antoinette's rustic retreat. Some say she just wanted a quiet place to escape palace life. Others insist it was a grotesque parody of peasant living, a kind of cosplay that cost more than an entire district of Paris. Either way, the optics are terrible. You wander into a print shop, half curious. It smells of ink, sweat, and scorched paper. The walls are plastered with satirical drawings of the royal family. The Queen is often shown with a giant wig full of birds, cakes, and ships. In one print, she's literally made of pastries. A man behind the counter nods at you, says nothing, keeps carving another block. Satire has become its own resistance. Everyone knows laughter is easier than crying, and often more dangerous. You pick up a pamphlet. It's called The Gluttons of Versailles. Catchy! Inside, it lists imaginary menus from the royal table. Cream of swan, butter diamond soup, cake pillows with gold flakes. You're 90% sure it's exaggerated, but it's so vivid you can practically taste the outrage. The message is clear: while you chew gristle, they dine like gods. Someone bumps into you as you leave the shop. He's running, sweaty, waving a new broadsheet. "They've stormed another bakery," he shouts. "Nothing left but flour dust." You join the growing crowd heading that way, partly to see, partly because crowds feel safe. It's strange. You're not hungry at this exact moment, but the hunger of others wraps around you like fog. At the smashed bakery, a woman clutches a torn sack of flour like it's treasure. Her eyes are wide. Someone nearby is already mixing it with rainwater to make a flat, sad biscuit. No one dares stop her. A man tells you this bakery used to serve fancy pastries, real viennoiseries with layers and shine. They served brioche here, he says bitterly. Not anymore. Then he spits. Later, you're in the Place de la Concorde, though it's not called that yet. Back then, it's the Place Louis XV. There's a scaffold being built. Not for bread, for something more permanent. You watch the workers hammer with quiet focus, like they're building furniture for a party everyone knows is coming. Someone beside you mutters, "The Queen should try living without flour." Another whispers, "She thinks flour is something you dust wigs with." These are the jokes now. They're never funny. They're more like coded messages passed between the desperate. A street performer appears wearing a dress made of old sackcloth. On her head, a paper crown. In her hand, a fake loaf of brioche carved from wood. She parades through the crowd yelling, "Eat cake, they said! It's delicious!" Then she drops to her knees and makes a dramatic choking noise. Everyone cheers. Someone throws her a real crust. She pockets it. This is theater. This is revolution with a laugh track. You return to the alley behind the Hôtel de Ville. People are organizing, not just protests, committees, petitions, public readings. You hear the words liberty and equality tossed around like pebbles in a shoe. Inspiring, yes, but uncomfortable when walked on. A young man offers you a copy of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. It's fresh off the press. You take it, read it slowly. It promises dignity, freedom, fraternity. But your stomach growls halfway through. Rights are important, but so is breakfast. Evening comes with gray clouds and the sour scent of wet stone. People huddle in corners, trading rumors. The Queen's been spotted in disguise. The King is hoarding flour in barrels shaped like children. The Austrians are sending ghost bakers to poison the wells. None of it makes sense, but none of it needs to. Truth is a luxury now, like butter. You find yourself wondering about the actual brioche. Historically, it's made from flour, eggs, butter, and sugar. A luxury item, yes, but still bread, technically. Not cake, just upgraded. You imagine someone in the royal kitchen crafting little golden buns, brushing them with egg wash, probably humming, probably not thinking about guillotines. The disconnect is dizzying. That night, you lie down on a mat made from woven rags. The city hums quietly, like it's holding its breath. You think about the Queen again, locked away in Versailles, oblivious, or maybe not. Maybe she knows. Maybe she's heard the phrase by now. Maybe it haunts her in her dreams. Let them eat brioche. 4 words. A pastry, a revolution. You wake to church bells, but they aren't marking a holy day. They're warning bells, clanging, echoing, panicked, a signal. You bolt upright, nearly forgetting where you are. The sky outside is bruised with smoke and dust. People are already moving, fast, determined, like they've been waiting for this exact moment. The storm has finally arrived. You push your way into the street. A boy shouts something about the Bastille. You squint toward the horizon and see the faint silhouette of that old prison. Gray, brooding, mostly symbolic these days. But symbolism matters. It always has. And today, apparently, it dies. You follow the flood of bodies through narrow lanes, past shopkeepers locking shutters and muttering prayers. There's a bakery along the way, windows smashed, but no one's stealing bread anymore. They're stealing muskets now. By the time you reach the Bastille, the crowd is thousands strong. Most don't have weapons. Some carry pitchforks, others kitchen knives. You even spot a woman with a giant spoon. It's oddly terrifying. The fortress stands defiant, tall, thick-walled, full of secrets. Only a handful of prisoners are inside, but that doesn't matter. It's the idea of it, the symbol, a stone loaf of tyranny, and today the people are carving it up. Shots ring out. You flinch. Smoke coils into the sky. Somewhere, a man is yelling about liberty with such passion that he forgets he's missing a shoe. You stay at the edge of the chaos, letting the revolution unfold like a slow-motion landslide. Eventually, the Bastille falls. Not neatly, not all at once, but enough. The gates are breached, the guards overwhelmed. A few hours later, the heads of those same guards are being paraded through the streets on pikes. You're beginning to notice a pattern. Everything beautiful in Paris is being replaced by something jagged. Historians still argue over what exactly the fall of the Bastille meant. Some see it as the spark that truly ignited the revolution. Others claim it was more symbolic than practical, an empty gesture dressed up as victory. But no one denies its power. Even now, standing here, ankle-deep in trampled papers and gunpowder soot, you feel it in your bones. The world has cracked. There's no going back. Later, back in your corner of the city, people are dancing. Actually dancing. Someone drags a broken violin into tune. Children wave scraps of red, blue, white cloth. A man offers you a tiny crust of something he insists is bread, though it tastes more like disappointment and dreams. It's not much, but tonight it feels like a feast. The Queen, of course, doesn't dance. She stays in Versailles, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Maybe she's watching the gardens. Maybe she's consulting with her hairdresser about the appropriate height of patriotic wigs. Either way, she's too far from the noise. But not for long. You find a group of radicals debating the next steps over a communal pot of potato stew. The potatoes are undercooked, and the conversation is too loud. Someone mentions that cake line again, says they read it in a leaflet this morning. She really said it, a woman insists. My cousin heard it from someone who works in the palace laundry. You stir your stew, unconvinced, but the room nods. The phrase has escaped its origins. It doesn't need to be true anymore. It's been promoted from rumor to legend, like a historical meme. Short, catchy, emotionally satisfying. The perfect slogan for a hungry people. sharpening their knives. In truth, you suspect the queen never said it. Not exactly. Historians today mostly agree it was already an old anecdote by the time she arrived in France. Rousseau mentions it in his Confessions, attributing it to a great princess, possibly decades before Marie Antoinette ever set foot in Versailles. It may have even been intended as sarcasm. But timing is everything, and she had the bad luck of being royalty during a decade when cake stopped being funny. Still, it fits too well to let go. The queen of cakes, the buttered villain, the woman who mistook flour rations for powdered wigs. You look out at the street again. Someone spray-painted "Cake for All" in bright red across a bakery wall. Ironic, you think, considering there's no cake for anyone. And yet, people are hopeful. Hope and hunger are strange twins. They grow up together in times like these. You retreat to your sleeping place and lie down, exhausted. The bells have stopped. The streets have quieted into a tense kind of calm. You can hear distant footsteps and the occasional crackle of torchlight. The Bastille is rubble now. The people have spoken. And the queen? She's still asleep in silk sheets. For now. You wake to the smell of bread again. But now it's different. It's not fresh. It's burnt, acrid, bitter at the edges. And the bread isn't yours. It's someone else's dream collapsing in an oven they never meant to light. You sit up slowly, brushing flour off your shirt, even though you haven't touched flour in days. That's how it feels now. The revolution is spreading, and so is the hunger. Out on the streets, people move slower. The excitement of Bastille Day has faded, replaced by queues, empty shelves, and an increasing number of people holding signs instead of weapons. The signs ask for food, for wages, for the price of flour to stop behaving like it's made of gold dust. You hear a woman screaming at a merchant. She's holding a single leek and demanding to know why it costs more than her shoes. The merchant shrugs. It's the weather. It's the supply lines. It's the invisible hand of the market. Take your pick. You choose not to buy anything. Instead, you follow a crowd moving toward the Hôtel de Ville. Whispers ripple like static through the group about a new document, a declaration of rights, something that might finally put the power in the people's hands, or at least in their bread baskets. You elbow your way to the front, where a man is reading aloud from a crumpled copy. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Sounds fancy, tastes like parchment, but you like the words. All men are born free and equal in rights. You nod, cautiously. Liberty, property, security, resistance to oppression. It rolls off the tongue like a prayer and hits your ears like a thunderclap. These words may not fill your stomach, but they fill the silence. Historians will later argue how universal these rights really were. Many note that men didn't mean everyone. It didn't mean women, or the enslaved, or foreigners, or the guy with no shoes yelling about leeks. Others argue it was a starting point, a spark, a lighthouse in a fog of royal nonsense. You think maybe it's both. And still, the bread question refuses to go away. You see it scribbled on walls, shouted from windows, debated in dusty cafes. Why is there still no bread? You hear names whispered now. Jacques Necker, the finance minister who tried to warn the king. He's gone, fired, rehired, fired again. The royal family plays politics like it's musical chairs, and the music never stops. Then there's the Queen, still at Versailles, still trying to project calm while everything burns around her. You imagine her reclining near a window, sipping something expensive, asking why the people seem so angry all the time. You want to believe she means well, but it's hard, especially when pamphlets start circulating with crude drawings of her, exaggerated wigs, exaggerated scandals, exaggerated everything. One paper claims she bought an emerald necklace worth the cost of feeding a village for a year. Another insists she holds secret orgies in the palace corridors. You're not sure what's true anymore, but the idea of her grows more monstrous with every week. Even when she speaks publicly, rarely, it's too little too late. She talks about devotion, about duty, about her children. She looks lovely in portraits, but none of it translates to the price of bread. And then comes the march. It begins as a murmur, the ripple, a single drop in the bucket of national frustration. A few hundred women, mostly fishmongers, market workers, mothers. They're furious, and they're marching to Versailles. You join them because, honestly, what else are you doing? They walk fast. They carry sticks. Some carry pikes. One carries a sword that looks more ceremonial than sharp. The mood is tense, but not cruel. Not yet. You walk for hours through mud and drizzle, blisters rising, knees aching. The palace emerges like a mirage, too clean, too symmetrical, too smug. The gardens are still trimmed, the fountains still burble. Someone throws a rock at a marble cherub. The guards eye the crowd nervously. The Queen peers out from behind a curtain. Some say she even came out on a balcony and bowed. Others swear she rolled her eyes and vanished behind the drapes. You don't see her, but you see what comes next. Negotiations, rumors, a broken gate, a guard killed, panic, screams, chaos again. The palace is too big to defend against thousands. Eventually, the royal family agrees to leave, not as a concession, as a strategy. Versailles is no longer safe. Paris calls. You walk back in the shadow of a gilded carriage. The Queen sits inside, silent, her children clinging to her sleeves. The King looks smaller than he did on the coins. People line the roads. Some cheer, some boo. Most just watch. It's not a triumph. It's a transfer. The monarchy is being relocated, closer to the people, closer to the hunger. You remember a woman saying, "Now we can keep an eye on them." And you think, the eye never blinks. You awaken to the soft clatter of hooves on cobblestone and the dull groan of wooden cartwheels. Paris again, but this time something's off. The city feels heavier. It's not just the clouds, which seem to hang lower than usual. It's not just the smell, which has graduated from bread and sewage to something more metallic, more final. It's in the way people walk, slower, shoulders hunched, as if they're trying not to attract attention. You pass a man selling buttons shaped like miniature guillotines. He grins at you. You don't grin back, because you've heard the rumors. The king is now a constitutional monarch, whatever that means. Basically, he's been downgraded from sun god to glorified mascot. His face still appears on coins, but now people laugh when they see it. You think about the Queen. She hasn't been seen much since the march from Versailles. Some say she's frightened. Others say she's furious. You guess it's a cocktail of both, served cold in a crystal glass. But today, your focus shifts, not to the king nor the queen, but to something more mundane and somehow more terrifying. Price controls. It starts with bread, of course, doesn't it always? The National Assembly, yes, the new political body that actually tries to represent the people, has decided to regulate the cost of flour. A good idea in theory, but flour isn't just flour. It's transportation and weather and greedy merchants and suspicious shortages that no one can quite explain. You remember one particularly strange theory, that aristocrats are hoarding grain in underground silos to starve the revolution into submission. Historians are still debating that one. Some call it absurd. Others point to mysterious losses of shipments from rural areas. And one or two diggers even claim they've found remnants of hidden storage sites. You chalk it up to conspiracy-flavored fiction. But then again, Paris has seen stranger things. You pass by a bakery. There's a line stretching down the block, and the baker is crying, literally crying, because she can't sell her loaves at a price that covers the cost of baking them. I'm losing money feeding people, she says, and if I raise the price, I'll lose my head. You believe her. The phrase price gouging has taken on a darker meaning lately. It's not just unethical, it's criminal, a capital offense. And that's when you realize just how serious this new regime is about bread. No more subsidies, no more tolerance for speculation, and certainly no more jokes about cake. You remember what that phrase meant just a few months ago. Let them eat brioche. It still echoes, though no one's sure Marie Antoinette ever said it. Most historians agree it was likely propaganda, words stuffed into her powdered mouth like an ironic pastry. But it worked. The myth outlived the truth, and now it's treated as gospel. Even school children whisper it with scandalized eyes. You once tried to explain that she probably didn't say it, that it came from Rousseau's Confessions, published long before Marie even became queen. But no one cared, because facts don't always win revolutions. Symbols do. You think about brioche now, how soft it is, how it flakes apart under the lightest touch. It's rich, sweet, buttery. Everything you're not. So yes, if someone like you were caught eating it in public these days, you might not be beheaded immediately, but people would stare. They'd whisper. They'd ask where you got it, who you know, who you are. And then, maybe, the Comité de Surveillance would ask too. That's the other thing now. There are committees, so many committees, watching everything, recording everything. Imagine a neighborhood watch, but with more ink and fewer boundaries. They come to your door and ask questions like, "How many eggs did you use this week?" And "Have you noticed any suspicious economic behavior in your area?" You don't even know what suspicious economic behavior looks like, but you nod along anyway. One night, you're at a friend's house, well, more of an acquaintance. He serves you stew, thick and brown and surprisingly good. Too good. You ask what's in it. He shrugs. You both know not to press. Later, you hear he's been arrested. Hoarding spices, they say. Which sounds ridiculous until you realize spice means access. Access means privilege. Privilege means the guillotine. You no longer ask what's in anything. By this point, you've learned to travel with your eyes down. Speak softly. Laugh only when others laugh first. You've seen people disappear for less. A grocer who joked that powdered wigs should be taxed. A seamstress who kept 3 loaves instead of 2. A child who said she missed Versailles. You're not even sure she knew what Versailles was. Still, even in this atmosphere of suspicion and thin soup, the people try to celebrate their wins. There's a new calendar now, did you know? The French Republican calendar. Out with the saints and Sundays, in with names like Brumaire and Frimaire, with weeks of 10 days each and months named after weather patterns, because apparently even time needed to be revolutionized. You miss Thursdays. The logic behind it makes some sense. Get rid of religious influence, promote secular rationality, show how committed you are to tearing down the past. But mostly, it makes you tired. The market only opens once every 10 days now. People forget their own birthdays. You met a man who aged 2 years by accident. Still, the bread lines stretch on. And sometimes, just sometimes, you catch yourself thinking, maybe Marie Antoinette did say it. Maybe she was that out of touch. Maybe, after years of corsets and garden parties, she really believed people could just switch to brioche like it was another powdered blush. Then you remember the baker crying, and the stew you didn't question, and the calendar that doesn't know what day it is. And you think, whether she said it or not, it doesn't matter now. The guillotine doesn't care about footnotes. You're standing in line again. You don't even remember getting in it. Maybe your legs just followed the habit. Lines have become like shadows in Paris, stretching around every corner, growing longer with each decree and new shortage. This one is for soap, or maybe onions. Honestly, you're not sure anymore. You just hope it's not another queue for pamphlets disguised as food distribution. You turn to the woman behind you, hoping for clarity, but she just shrugs. I heard it's for candles, she says, or passports. Both would be useful, because now even leaving the city requires papers. Not just any papers, approved papers, with stamps and signatures, and someone who owes you a favor at the local Comité de Salut Public. You once tried to leave without them, and the guards at the gate treated you like you'd confessed to being Marie Antoinette's hairdresser. You step out of the line. You're not even mad. You're just tired. Instead, you wander. That's something you still have the freedom to do. Walk without purpose. For now. The streets hum with whispers. The posters have changed. Fewer royal insults, more bold declarations from Robespierre, Saint-Just, Danton. Their faces are everywhere now. Serious, pale, slightly overdrawn. You wonder how long it takes for a revolutionary to become wallpaper. You pass a building where once you saw musicians rehearsing Vivaldi. Now it's a tribunal office. Inside, a man in spectacles is scribbling names on a long list. You know what list that is. Everyone knows. And yet, life goes on, sort of. People still get married. They still flirt, awkwardly behind piles of cabbages and sacks of dirt. You once saw a couple kissing in a doorway, only to stop mid-embrace when someone walked by in a tri-colored sash. "We were just breathing," the man yelled before ducking inside. You're beginning to think breathing will require documentation soon. At home, you light a stub of a candle. It smells faintly of turnips, which probably isn't a good sign. But it casts enough light to read by, and you pull out the latest Journal de la Montagne. It's filled with long speeches and glorious visions of the Republic. But you've noticed that no one writes about the little things anymore, like how bread tastes of sawdust lately, or how every third person now seems to own a tricolored cockade they never remove, even in bed. It's all virtue and vengeance. Still, you read it because not reading it might seem unpatriotic. And in this climate, unpatriotic is just a slower way of saying doomed. Historians still argue over whether the Reign of Terror was inevitable. Some say it was baked into the revolution from the start, violence in the batter, so to speak. Others believe it could have been avoided if only the king had been quicker to reform, or if bread prices hadn't risen quite so sharply, or if people had just been kinder. You snort softly at that. Kindness is in short supply these days. You think back to when you first heard the term terror. It sounded exaggerated then, just another dramatic headline. But now it's printed on official decrees. To be virtuous, one must be vigilant, they say. Terror is only justice, prompt, severe, inflexible. You wonder who wrote that, and whether they sleep at night. You visit a friend who used to be a seamstress. Her fingers don't work so well anymore. Too cold, too little food, too much tension. She started making tricolored dolls to sell in the market. They have tiny painted guillotines for accessories. Children love them, she says, and laughs. You're not sure whether to laugh too, so you just nod. At some point, you hear that Robespierre wants to create a new religion. Not Christianity, something called the cult of the supreme being. You try not to laugh this time, but come on, it sounds like a name for a progressive rock band. Still, he insists it's serious. A civic religion, free of superstition, rooted in reason. So naturally, the first festival features people in togas, artificial mountains, and symbolic flames. You go because everyone goes. You're told it's mandatory joy. And you have to admit, there's something oddly calming about the blue smoke, the rustle of fake laurels, the faint hum of a choir that has never once practiced in harmony. For a brief moment, it feels like the old Paris again, before the committees, before the line for turnip candles. But then the speeches begin, and the lists, and the silent calculations in everyone's eyes. You spot a neighbor you haven't seen in weeks. He nods at you. You nod back. Later, you'll hear he was arrested that night for excessive sarcasm. You didn't know that was a charge, but honestly, you get it. You begin to count the people you've lost. Some to the blade, others to fear. A few just vanished, like smoke in the wind. And still, there are speeches. One of your favorites is Danton. He's loud, charismatic, always just a little bit sweaty. The kind of man who would have run a tavern, if not a revolution. You think he might actually understand people. So of course, they arrest him. They say he's gone soft, that he wants to slow down the executions, that he's a threat to purity. You watch as they carry him off, still shouting, still joking, even with his hands bound. Later, you hear he told the executioner, "Don't forget to show my head to the people. It's worth the look." You don't know whether to be inspired or horrified. You go home, light another turnip candle, write a letter to no one, stare at a wall for a while. It's oddly comforting. You dream of brioche, but not the taste, just the texture. The way it flakes apart when touched, like something too soft for this world, too fragile to survive, like joy, like safety, like the idea that bread could ever be just bread. You're not sure what wakes you. Maybe it's the cartwheels outside. Maybe it's just that strange intuition you've developed lately, the one that stirs you when danger is in the air, like a sixth sense fine-tuned by months of revolutions and rumors. You sit up slowly. The candle has burned out again, leaving a waxy puddle and a dark smudge on the table. In the hallway, someone coughs, 3 quick bursts and a long wheeze. You know exactly which neighbor that is. You lie back down, but your eyes stay open, because tomorrow's execution list is longer than usual. They've been reading them aloud in the square, some kind of macabre efficiency measure. Save parchment. Terrify more people at once. It works. You could feel the tension ripple through the crowd like a cold breeze made of names. Yours wasn't on it. Yet. But you recognized others. A man who used to repair shoes while humming arias. A woman who sold garlic out of a basket so big she disappeared behind it. A boy who once gave you half an apple for no reason. You remember these things. You don't remember why they were arrested. Suspicion, probably. That's the new favorite word. It stretches to cover everything from owning silverware to frowning too much during Robespierre's speeches. Once, you sneezed during a tribute to Marat and spent a week wondering if someone had noticed. You hear footsteps outside. Not hurried, just deliberate. Revolutionary boots don't scuff, they stomp. You freeze, trying not to breathe too loudly, which is ironic considering how much this revolution talks about liberty. The footsteps pass. That's the 4th false alarm this week. By morning, you decide to venture out. You've heard whispers about something called the Law of 22 Prairial. It sounds like a recipe, or maybe a perfume. But no, it's the latest legal reform. And by reform, you mean elimination. Under the new law, trials are even shorter. Accusations need no evidence. The verdict is almost always guilty, and the sentence is death. The guillotine has never been busier. They say it squeaks now, like it's grown tired of its own work. You try to make a joke about it to the fishmonger. Guess justice is getting streamlined, you say. He doesn't laugh. He hands you a sardine and looks away. Historians still debate whether Robespierre believed in what he was doing at this point. Some say he was driven by paranoia. Others claim he genuinely thought he was building a new moral world. Either way, he stopped listening. To friends, to critics, to common sense. He started giving speeches no one could interrupt. Started dressing in more elaborate outfits. You once saw him in a sky blue coat with a white cravat so stiff it looked like it could cut glass. Someone whispered, "He looks like a porcelain saint." You pretended not to hear. You remember when people used to cheer for him. Now they just nod, cautiously, like agreeing with gravity. Then the unthinkable happens. Robespierre is absent from a major assembly. Not sick, just missing. Paris buzzes. No one knows whether to be afraid or hopeful. 2 days later, he reappears, makes a speech about new conspiracies, and refuses to name names. The audience shifts uncomfortably. Even Saint Just looks unsure. And then it begins, the great unraveling. You're not there when they arrest him, but you hear about it from at least 6 different sources, each more dramatic than the last. One woman says he screamed. Another says he calmly fixed his cravat and whispered, "At last." You doubt both versions. What you know is this. The man who once promised a republic of virtue is now hiding in a room with a shattered jaw, half his face missing, shot either by himself or someone else. Even in death, the story can't agree on the details. They guillotine him the next day. No speeches, no ceremony, just a sharp fall and silence. You feel something shift inside you. Not joy, not sadness, just a kind of numb relief. Like when a terrible fever finally breaks and you realize you're still alive, even if barely. The streets don't erupt in celebration. They don't erupt at all. It's more like a long exhale across the city. Shopkeepers reopen with cautious eyes. Children are allowed to play in groups again. You hear laughter, quiet and unsteady, like a song remembered from a dream. Someone bakes bread shaped like Robespierre's head. You try not to think about what that means. You visit the Place de la Révolution. The guillotine is still there, but no one approaches it. Not today. Not yet. The wooden platform looks sun-bleached and weary. Someone has left a bouquet of wilting daisies at its base. You stand there a long time. You don't know why. Maybe to remember? Maybe to forget. In the weeks that follow, the tribunals slow down. The executions taper off. The people start speaking in full sentences again, instead of whispered half-thoughts. Even the pigeons seem more relaxed. The revolution, it turns out, can't run at full speed forever. But its scars? Those will linger. You pass a building and realize you don't know what it used to be. A bakery? A bank? It's just walls now, papered with old notices and new hopes. One poster says, "Citizens, rebuild." You wonder how. Because you've lost neighbors, certainty, and several years of your life. You're not sure what normal is anymore. Whether it involves breakfast without fear, or politics without lists. But you hope. You hope tomorrow brings coffee, or at least bread that doesn't taste like kindling. You smile at the thought, which, in this city, is an act of rebellion all on its own. You wake up to the sound of hammering. Not the threatening kind. No boots, no torches, no surprise decrees tacked to doors at dawn. Just construction. Honest, old-fashioned hammering. It's oddly comforting. Like the city is remembering how to be a city again. You shuffle to the window, rubbing your eyes, and there it is. Someone is fixing a window pane that's been broken since the September massacres. You didn't even realize it had stayed broken. You just stopped looking up. The bakery across the street has reopened. The new sign is clumsily painted, but it promises real brioche again. Not that coarse excuse made of mashed turnips and resentment. Real brioche. You stare at it for a long moment, wondering whether you should laugh, cry, or just go back to bed. You opt for a bath. There's enough firewood now, and the water heats quickly. You ease in slowly, and for the first time in what feels like years, you don't flinch at every creak in the floorboards. The air smells like soap, not fear. You soak until your skin wrinkles. That evening, you wander into a cafe. People are talking about theater, about the weather, even about philosophy, which is always a bad sign, but somehow feels delightful tonight. Someone says Voltaire would have hated all of this, and everyone chuckles. Not with malice, just a shared sigh. You sip something warm and bitter and don't ask what it is. No one talks about the Committee of Public Safety. No one mentions the mountain of heads, the garden of paranoia, the months when even silence could be lethal. It's like the city has declared a collective amnesia pact. You're not sure if that's healthy, but it's certainly easier. Later that night, you pass the Palais Royal. A group of teenagers are rehearsing a play with paper swords. One wears a powdered wig made of curled rags. They're laughing too hard to get through their lines. You watch for a while, unseen, and something stirs in your chest. Something soft and nostalgic and very much alive. Historians still argue about what ended the Reign of Terror. Some say it was Robespierre's overreach. Others say it was the guillotine itself, so overused that people stopped fearing it and started resenting it. A few blame poor logistics, as if the revolution simply collapsed under the weight of too many bureaucratic errands. You suspect it was exhaustion. You can only run on adrenaline for so long before your bones beg for peace. Speaking of which, you pass by a bookstore. Half the titles are redacted. Someone's tried to unban Rousseau, but only if read under supervision. The back shelf now stocks romance novels again, which feels both trivial and revolutionary. You buy one. The woman at the counter smirks when you hand it over. "For your political studies?" she asks. You nod solemnly. A matter of state. She doesn't ask your name. You don't ask hers. Trust isn't fully back yet, but the tension's thinned. In the weeks that follow, the festivals return. Not the state ones where everyone had to march in unison and pretend the sun was a citizen. Real ones, with off-key music, overcooked food, and children running wild. You even dance once. Badly. Your feet remember the steps, but not the joy. Still, you try. People are painting again. Not revolutionary murals, just flowers, cats, a dog chasing a butterfly across a wall where a public execution once drew a crowd. It's jarring at first, but then it feels right, like graffiti against grief. You begin writing letters, not to anyone in particular, just to remember how. The quill feels foreign in your fingers. Your words come out cautious at first, then bolder. You sign them all with the same phrase, "Still here." You're not alone. One night you find yourself in a candlelit salon, listening to a violinist play something slow and aching. No one speaks. The music fills every corner. You don't cry exactly, your eyes just water. Must be the smoke. Later, someone hands you a slice of actual brioche. You hesitate, then take a bite. It's soft, buttery, almost absurdly rich. You laugh a little too loudly. The woman beside you, gray hair in a loose bun, shawl patched with at least 4 decades of thread, smiles and says, "Guess it's safe to eat that again." You raise your piece like a toast. To survival. She taps hers against yours. To absurdity. It's a good moment. Simple, unremarkable, completely illegal once. Now, it feels like a small rebellion against everything that tried to crush it. Outside, the city exhales again. You walk home slowly, dodging puddles and drunken students arguing about whether history is circular or just poorly edited. Back in your room, you sit by the window. You look at the stars.
They've always been there, silent, distant, disinterested in revolutions or regimes. But tonight, they seem a little closer. You breathe deeply. No soldiers outside. No neighbors whispering behind doors. Just silence. And the faint, ridiculous memory of the days when a brioche could get you executed. You smile again, which really might be the most dangerous thing you've done all day.
Morning comes slowly now. Gone are the days of jarring wake-ups. No panicked knocks, no distant thud of a crowd forming for yet another spontaneous execution. Just sunlight leaking through the shutters and the sound of someone humming while sweeping the street below. You lie in bed longer than usual. Not out of fear, out of laziness. A rare, guiltless laziness. Eventually, you rise and make coffee. Real coffee, not the boiled barley nonsense that used to pass for patriotism in liquid form. It smells like mornings before the storm, like a time when your worries were smaller, more manageable, and didn't involve guillotines. You take your cup to the windowsill and watch Paris blink itself awake. The city is slower now, wary, like a dog that's been kicked too many times. But it's healing. The markets are louder. The music is less funereal. Someone is playing a flute badly near the Pont Neuf. You listen anyway. And then you decide to go see the square. Place de la Révolution, they called it, back when names were always yelling. Now it's trying out new titles, softer ones. Place de la Concorde is being tested. Concord, as in peace, agreement, a nice word. Kind of ironic, given the blood still drying in the cobblestones. But you go. You walk slowly, passing cafes that once went dark out of fear. They're lit again. That same old dog still sits by the door of Café Dubois, though he's older now, more dignified, like he too has lived through a regime or two. And then, there it is, the former site of the guillotine. Empty, not fenced off, not turned into a shrine, just a square. Someone is selling roasted chestnuts where Robespierre once lost his jaw. You pause, staring at the ground. It's been scrubbed clean, but you know. Everyone knows. The stories are passed down in low voices and side glances. But now, no one stops to gawk. People walk right over it with shopping baskets and half-forgotten errands. The erasure is almost gentle. You sit on a nearby bench. The sky is blue. Birds are arguing in a tree that definitely wasn't there 2 years ago. A child runs past chasing a hoop with a stick, so carefree it hurts to watch. You remember the Festival of the Supreme Being, that strange, awkward affair where Robespierre dressed in blue satin and gave a speech to the heavens. He was trying so hard to make the revolution spiritual, like a divine improv show. Historians still debate whether it was his vanity or the absurdity of the whole thing that finally made people snap. Maybe both. You remember the look in people's eyes that day. Tired, confused, a little embarrassed. He was guillotined not long after. Now the only supreme being in the square is a fat pigeon demanding bits of your croissant. You oblige. A man nearby is sketching the skyline. You sneak a glance. It's rough, but honest. No guillotine, no flags, just rooftops and light. He catches you looking and shrugs. Trying to draw things as they are, he says. You nod. Not as we pretended they were, he smiles.
Exactly. Later that day, you stop by a friend's home. You haven't seen her since The List. You both survived it, somehow, but the silence stretched longer than you expected. Reconnection feels risky, like opening a sealed box you're not sure is empty. But she opens the door with the same crooked smile she always had, and the fear melts. You talk about nothing, everything. The time you both misquoted Rousseau to get out of political duty, the time she made brioche with too much butter and nearly killed a neighbor with deliciousness. You laugh until you can't breathe. The revolution took many things, but not this. The door is open again. You head home just before dusk. The streets shimmer with lantern light. A couple argues gently over where to eat. Someone plays a harpsichord behind an open window. A cat watches it all like an aloof chaperone. You pause by a fountain. It used to be stained red. Now it bubbles clear, clean, almost hopeful. You dip your fingers in, half expecting a vision. Instead, it's just cold water. Normal water. That's enough. Historians still argue about how to describe this moment in time. Is it post-revolutionary? Pre-empire? A brief lull between disasters? They throw around terms like Thermidorian reaction and the White Terror, but none of them capture the truth that Paris, like you, is just trying to figure out how to breathe again. You reach your front door. Before you step inside, you look back once more. The street is quiet, peaceful in a fragile, trembling kind of way, like a lullaby sung after a nightmare. You go in, light a candle, warm some soup, the simple rhythm of a life slowly returning. Tomorrow you might bake, or write, or visit a friend. But tonight, you just sit. You're not waiting for the next explosion. You're just sitting, alive. And for the first time in years, that feels revolutionary.
You dream now. Not the fitful, feverish kind of dreaming that comes when you're hungry or afraid or sleeping beside a hidden list of names that might include your own. No, these dreams are soft. Disjointed, yes, but soft. A memory here, a smell there, the sound of bread baking in the morning, a street performer's lute, your cousin's hideous wig at a wedding before all this began. When you wake up, it's raining. Not the dramatic storm kind of rain, just the sort that smudges the windows and convinces you to move slower. You're grateful for it. The air smells clean. The city feels wrapped in a damp wool blanket, muffled and forgiving. You boil water for tea. Tea, real, imported, absurdly expensive, non-patriotic tea. You traded a whole jar of goose fat for it. Worth it. You sit near the fire, blanket over your shoulders, and you read. It's an old book, Montaigne's essays, worn and foxed and full of underlined bits you don't remember marking. You reread a passage about friendship. He says that true friendship is rare and perfect and only happens once or twice in a lifetime. You sigh. You think of the friend who gave you this book. She's gone now. Not to the guillotine, just gone. Moved to the countryside. Needed fresh air and fewer ghosts. Maybe one day you'll write to her. After tea, you venture out. The umbrella you own is predictably broken, so you wrap a scarf around your head in the style of an especially tired nun and walk anyway. The streets are half empty. Those who are out move slowly. Rain always makes the city more human. You stop at a small bakery. The woman who runs it has one eye and no patience, but her bread is divine.
She hands you a still warm brioche, one of the small, plain ones, nothing fancy. You make a joke about not being arrested for it. She doesn't laugh, but her mouth twitches. Progress. Outside, you eat it slowly under a dripping awning. It's good, buttery, a little eggy, somehow nostalgic and defiant at once. The irony is not lost on you. If this were 2 years ago, you'd be a walking indictment of counter-revolutionary decadence. Now, you're just a slightly damp person with breakfast. What a strange freedom! A boy passes on stilts, not as part of a parade or protest, just because stilts are fun. He wobbles, cackles, and nearly knocks over a man carrying fish. The man curses, then laughs. The fish are fine. You think of festivals, of the times before everything was wrapped in banners and blood, of saints' days with no political agenda, just dancing and far too much wine. You remember tossing flower petals at strangers. You remember being happy without being dangerous. Historians argue about what festivals really meant during the Revolution. Were they expressions of people's will? Manipulative tools by the state? Attempts to fill the void left by religion? You think maybe they were just excuses to dance. You make your way toward the old district where you used to buy fabric.
It's changed. More vacant lots, fewer stalls. But some of the shops are coming back. You see a bolt of blue silk in a window and stop to stare. It's absurdly impractical, but it reminds you of the coat you once wore to a New Year's masquerade. A man in the shop sees you looking and opens the door. "Wanna touch it?" he says. You do. It's soft, like memory. You don't buy it, but you thank him. The rain stops, the clouds split like a slow exhale, and sunlight drips through in beams. People start to emerge again, some cautious, others giddy. A couple starts singing. No one tells them to stop. You find yourself at the Seine. The river is high today, full of yesterday's debris and tomorrow's potential. You lean on the railing and just watch it flow. Someone's left a little bouquet of wildflowers tied to the rail with twine. No note, no explanation, just there. You add a sprig of rosemary from your pocket. Why not? A woman beside you hums a lullaby. You don't know the tune, but it's familiar in a way that makes your chest ache. Time is moving again. Not rushing, just moving, like a wheel finally unstuck. You walk home slower than usual, stopping often. At a bookstore run by a man with 6 cats and no shelves. At a fountain where 2 children are trying to see who can hold their breath the longest. At a corner where an elderly woman sells buttons from a tiny cart and tells fortunes if you ask nicely. She grabs your hand without warning. "You're done with fear," she says, eyes narrowed. You blink. "What?" "You heard me." She hands you a green button. Wear it when you want to remember. You do. Back at home, you light a candle for no reason other than habit. The wax pool forms quickly, flickering in that way that makes you feel like the room is breathing with you. You write a letter, not to anyone in particular, just to the future. Just to remind yourself that this happened, that you lived through it, that there was once a time when eating brioche could get you executed, and now it's just breakfast. You wake to birdsong, not the orchestrated nature soundtrack kind, but the real thing, erratic, insistent, slightly off-key. A pigeon argues with a sparrow outside your window. Neither backs down. You admire their conviction.
The room is cool and dim, the light filtered through linen curtains you bartered for with a story about your cousin pretending to be a Jacobin to get out of paying rent. The fabric still smells faintly of lavender. You stretch. Nothing hurts. That, in itself, feels revolutionary. You've survived another season. The calendar says it's Floreal, which sounds like a perfume brand, but is in fact the spring month of the revolutionary calendar. You're still not used to it. 12 months of exactly 30 days each, with 5 bonus days at the end for festivals or confusion or mild chaos. Historians still debate whether the new calendar was meant to free the people from the tyranny of the church or just make everyone late to lunch. You step outside. The air is syrupy with early blossoms and chimney smoke. A neighbor is sweeping his doorstep with the resigned dignity of a man who knows he'll do it again tomorrow. You wave. He nods. No one speaks this early unless something's on fire. You walk to the market square. It's livelier than usual. There's an old man balancing oranges on a broomstick and a trio of teenagers trying to juggle raw eggs. One of them drops one. The yolk hits the cobblestone with a soft splat, and everyone gasps as if someone's just been guillotined. Then they laugh. You do too. You buy 2 carrots, a bunch of herbs, and, miracle of miracles, a knob of butter. The vendor has no change, so you pay with a poem you wrote on the back of a theater program. She reads it aloud and claps once. Transaction complete. Bartering has become an art. Money still exists, technically, but its value changes daily, like the mood of an aging opera diva. You once bought a week's worth of soup in exchange for 1 polished button and a passable imitation of Robespierre's voice. You still do the impression at parties, if there were parties. There used to be salons, gatherings in rich, echoey rooms where powdered people debated Rousseau while drinking liquors so sweet they could melt your teeth. Now the salons are gone, replaced by back rooms and borrowed candles and wine that tastes mostly like vinegar. But the conversation remains. You spend your afternoons reading aloud with others, not for show, just because voices feel warmer when shared. Today you read Voltaire, but you do it in a terrible accent, and someone throws a grape at you. You declare yourself wounded. A mock duel ensues, using baguettes as swords. You lose. Gloriously. You spend the evening sewing a patch into your coat. It's the same coat you've worn since the riots, now 3 shades darker from rain, smoke, and time. The patch is from a curtain that once hung in a mansion you helped empty during the early days. You don't know what happened to the owners. You hope they're somewhere safe, baking bread and learning to be kind. You stitch slowly. The thread tugs like memory. Each pass through the fabric reminds you of a day you'd rather not revisit, but also one you'd never trade. You hum softly, not a lullaby, just something you half remember from the countryside. Something about sheep and stars and not falling into rivers. Night arrives without asking. The candles flicker. You've moved past fear of fire. It's a friend now, gentle and loyal, as long as you feed it properly. You boil lentils and add half a bay leaf like you're royalty. You eat in silence, spoon tapping the bowl like a metronome. You remember when silence used to be terrifying. Now it's a blanket. Outside, a fiddler plays near the baker's corner. You recognize the tune, an old dance meant for stomping and spinning. You sway a little in your seat. You used to know the steps. You used to teach them to children who thought they were spells to bring spring faster. Maybe they were. You write a letter to no one in particular. Dear Someday, today I ate carrots, sewed my coat, and remembered how to smile without flinching. The sky was pink at dusk. I didn't hide. Love, someone still here. You tuck it into a book. Maybe someone will find it in 100 years and wonder what you meant. Maybe they'll assume you were braver than you actually were. That's fine. You clean up, slowly, methodically. You leave your window open a crack to let in the night air. It smells like possibility and old chimney soot. You climb into bed. The sheets are coarse but warm. The pillow is lumpy but familiar. You adjust it once, twice. Your body fits into its usual grooves. You exhale. Not the rushed kind of breath you let go when someone knocks at your door. The other kind, the kind that means you're safe, for now. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will arrive on schedule, with or without sunshine. But tonight you get to sleep without a knife under your pillow, without boots by the door, without the taste of last words in your mouth. The revolution is quiet now, and for once, so are you.
You dream in soft colors, faded blues like well-washed fabric, the pale yellow of butter melting on crusty bread, the warm brown of bookshelves too full to stay neat. In your dream, no one is shouting. There are no lines for flour. Time is elastic, slow enough to savor, but not so still it becomes sad. You wake up before the sun. There's something holy about this hour. Not in the religious sense, but in the way the air seems to pause for you, like it's holding its breath while you figure out how you want to be today. You put on your patched coat. The thread held. It always does. Outside, the street is dusted with dew. A stray cat watches you from a windowsill. Its tail flicks once, judgmentally. You nod respectfully. This is its kingdom. You're just borrowing a corner of it. You walk to the old print shop. It doesn't really print anymore, not like it used to. The machines are too tired, the ink too hard to come by. But the owner lets you and a few others use the space. It smells like dust and revolution, which is basically the national scent by now. You sit on a crate and start reading yesterday's notes. They're chaotic. Margins filled with doodles and arrows pointing to questions like, did Marie Antoinette actually say that? And what if liberty is just an expensive hat? Historians still argue about both. You read them aloud to the room, even though it's empty. Your voice bounces back to you, quieter, but somehow wiser. You imagine someone from the future finding your words and thinking, ah, so this is how they endured. You imagine being studied. You imagine being misunderstood. It's comforting. At mid-morning, you walk to the gardens. Once reserved for nobles with names too long to remember, the gardens now belong to everyone and no one. Wild mint grows between paving stones. Bees drift lazily between blossoms. A woman nearby hums as she weeds a patch of lettuce. Her hands are calloused, her shoulders strong. You smile at her. She doesn't look up, but you know she feels it. You sit on a bench warmed by the sun. The wood creaks under you, gently. You pull a piece of bread from your coat pocket and eat it slowly, the way someone eats when they've been hungry before and don't take full bellies for granted. A child runs past, shouting something about an imaginary dragon. You nod solemnly. Best be careful, you whisper. Those ones like stealing socks.
The child giggles and salutes you. You feel knighted. Later, in a quieter part of town, you pass the bakery. You can't afford the pastries, but the smell alone is generous. It reminds you of childhood, of flour-dusted aprons and burned fingertips. The baker catches your eye and winks. You blush like a teenager. You're not sure if it's from the wink or the memory of once stealing a tart and blaming it on your cousin. You write another letter that evening. Dear someone I'll never meet, I watched a bee dance today. I think it was choreographed. The baker smiled at me. I didn't flinch. Also, I can now sew a button with my eyes closed. Progress, right? Yours in breadcrumbs and badly rhymed poetry, a citizen with excellent taste in benches. You leave the letter folded under a loose brick near the fountain. It's a thing people do now. Letters to no one, or maybe to everyone. Some are funny, some are sad, some are just recipes. You once found one that said, "If you're reading this, remember that soup is better shared." You taped it to your wall. Evening comes like molasses, slow and sticky. You light a single candle and read by its flicker. The book is missing pages, but your brain fills in the gaps. You imagine Marie Antoinette not in her gilded salons, but barefoot in a field, complaining about mud and asking for cheese. You smile. You fall asleep before finishing the chapter. No nightmares tonight. Just dreams of quiet streets, warm bread, and cats that don't judge. Closing. Calm. 300 words. So now, here we are. The candle has burned low, the ink has dried, and the revolution, for all its thunder and thunderheads, has grown still again. You've walked through days of noise and nights of silence, shared laughter in alleyways and letters folded into corners of brick. You've bartered stories for herbs, worn your coat thin with living, and learned how to measure peace not by what's missing, but by what stays. The hum of bees, the warmth of bread, the sound of your own voice reading out loud to no one in particular. As the last echoes of cobblestones and whispered debates settle into memory, you feel your body soften into the weight of the present moment. Your fingers relax, your jaw unclenches. Even your thoughts begin to drift, slowly, lazily, like leaves following a current you no longer need to steer. Out the window, the stars are polite tonight. They blink gently, not asking questions, not demanding attention, just shining, just there. The world is quieter than it was yesterday, and tomorrow can wait. For now, your breath is steady. Your heartbeat hums its lullaby. There is nothing left to plan, nothing to regret, nothing to chase or prove or fix. Only this stillness, only this moment, only this sleep.